it in the chat if you can't, and I will try and rectify that as quick as I can. Let's just see if anyone comments before we crack on with everything. There you go. You're good. You can all hear me. Perfect. Thank you. Apologies for the delay there. I'm sure you all have had a similar situation before, but as you can see from behind me, it is a completely different surroundings because I am away. And with that in mind, I've only got one monitor, so I will be dipping back to the chat, sort of picking up any questions or whatever people may have. So just bear with me on that. The audio is probably not as good as it is used to, although you can hear me for once, which is good. And yeah, let's just jump straight in with where we are. And I mean, hey, what did we talk about last week? We talked about the fact that we felt like Bitcoin was going to hit an all-time high. And there it was, Thursday last week, $112,000 per Bitcoin. And I think we just actually probably need to take a moment, just let that sink in, actually. $112,000 per Bitcoin. I mean, it's crazy when we think back on where we were, certainly when I started in crypto, but even the start of this cycle, and dare I say, even sort of 12 months ago, when we were really battling sort of that 70K to 40K battle. But we've not made it. I'm not saying that's the end of it, but through tenacity, luck, perseverance, whatever, we sort of managed to ride our fortunes up to where we currently find ourselves. And granted, okay, we're not 112,000 anymore, but we are fairly close. We've had a slight pullback, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. I think the whole point of what I want to try and talk about now is, okay, we've hit a new all-time high, but what next? Because most of us don't want that to be the top of where this cycle is going to go. Most of us obviously want to see Bitcoin and altcoins go a lot higher. And so we just need to talk about where that's going to, or what may happen in the short and medium terms. And I'm not going to bother with the long term. Most of us here, we're still thinking that sort of like 5 to 6 month cycle time left. And so that's where we're going. I'm sorry, I've got to do it through paranoia. Just double check that you can still hear me. Okay, yep, we still can. So that's all good. So it's a bit of a random delay when that goes on. So the other thing that I thought was fantastic, and we'll come to have a look at the charts a little bit later on. Sorry, I'm using my trackpad. Is Bitcoin Pizza Day. Now, most of us are probably aware of the story of Bitcoin Pizza, so I'm not going to necessarily rehash that. But Bitcoin Pizza Day falls on the 22nd of May every year. And that just so happened to be the day that we hit our new all-time high. And so it's crazy to think, the first thing, first item that was ever purchased with Bitcoin, arguably, was Bitcoin Pizza. And the story, 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, effectively. But this story, it's one of those ones where I think you really get to just appreciate how far we've come in terms of Bitcoin, but also just sort of provide you with that long-sighted kind of vision of, what, that is wild that this happened 15 years ago, or however long ago it was. Where will we be in another 15 years? And I don't think we're going to see the same multiple as what that is there, but it just goes to show that actually this asset class has just continued to outperform it. And what a day to hit such an historic all-time high. It does make it amazing to think that actually those 2 pizzas effectively now cost over $1 billion, which is just wild when you think about it. God knows why. I'd love to know the story of what happened with those 10,000 BTC afterwards. Unlikely that the gentleman that had it probably still holds on to them. But the fact of the matter is, it just shows you the strength of what this asset can be. And I think that's why most of us are so excited to be in it and to sort of see where it goes. Now, in terms of just going back quickly onto the price action, again, we'll always break these down in more details, and apologies that the screen is a little bit small. But on the 3-day time frame for Bitcoin, just consolidating over the last week or so from where we were. We had that drop all the way back last week when we were sort of live, back to that 102 level. We've sort of bounced off that lovely, moved nicely back up. And actually, it's not on the moment. We could probably draw another one of these lines, a simplistic view of life, sort of here. Bitcoin's clearing it. It's consolidated a couple of times over the last week on that level. and we're just looking for that next move up. But for me, really looking at the 106 on a much higher level, 106 and 102 are the two levels that I'd be looking for any sort of pullback in action from there. In terms of some of the other charts, once this starts to move, so Bitcoin dominance. So actually interesting with Bitcoin dominance. Last week we had the three green candles. We were moving back up. I was talking about we're trying to retake that 65% level. But actually since then, we had a low test here, which looked like, hey, we'll move it up. But actually the last 3 days, this candle here kind of formed a bit of a high test rejection off that sort of 64.5% level. And it's reflected in some of the altcoins, just how far they're moving versus Bitcoin at the moment. Given that the preceding candle was a low test and this one's a high test, kind of knocking each other out. But what we can see is actually this is a lower high that's currently forming. So maybe we're on for another altcoin. My personal view still stands that I think we will at least retest that 65%, if not looking to get towards 70%. How and when that happens, we'll just have to wait and see. But my view is still that Bitcoin is the king, and that hasn't necessarily broken in the cycle. We lose 62, start falling down to 61. Maybe I'll change my mind. In terms of total two, so everything but Bitcoin. Again, despite what I'm saying, vol time and everything, we still haven't been able to clear this level of 1.25 trillion. We have tried our best over the last week or two. But each time we have been battered back down on altcoins. And so that's always just sort of in the back of my mind. We've got to clear that. I can't even then get too excited unless we clear sort of 1.35 and really sort of the bottom side of this, or 1.3, should we say. But the battleground for me is 1.25 as it currently stands. And then BitTensor. And BitTensor, looking on this chart right now, again, 3-day time frame, just consolidating quite nicely. Yes, I've got these diagonal lines here, which have been here for some time, which they've been consolidating quite nicely. But even if you didn't look at those, the last 2 weeks, bit of sideways action. We always kind of like that in terms of it just catching its breath, looking for that next move up. And if you were just to look at this and just sort of, raw moves, that move up from sort of 180 to 350, consolidating for 2 weeks, move from 350 to about 450, consolidating for a couple of weeks. I do think that, should we get that upwards direction, the next real target that we're probably looking at 550, maybe that sort of 580 kind of level, the top line of where this would extend out if I had done that, matching up with some of these horizontal price actions from beginning of the year, back end of last year. But we'll go into those in a bit more detail later on. From a news point of view, let me actually just, what I'm going to do? After each little segment, I'm just going to go make sure that people can still hear me. Still got the thumbs up and everyone is still here. Hopefully that is the case. Let's just make this a bit bigger. Let me know if there's any issues with this. Moving that down. You know what? Anyway. Might not be recording this. Anyway, we'll worry about that one a little bit later on. So, what did we have? So we went from the joys of the all-time high on Thursday at 112,000. And it's natural that we were going to see some sort of a pullback whenever the pump past the previous all-time high of 109 ceased, and that's happened. But Trump couldn't give us 24 hours, could he? He sort of waited till late in the day and then had a little bit of a social media rant at the EU and sort of threatened them with tariffs starting on the 1st of June. I know this article talks about July 9th, but on Friday he hit us with it was going to be 50%. 1st of June, they ain't playing ball. Markets closed for Memorial Weekend, and we were just sat there left to stew as the markets reacted pretty negatively towards that. And then lo and behold, what happens? Sort of Sunday night, Monday morning, Trump sort of has a change of heart. He said that actually that's helped bring the EU to the table a little bit faster. And so, 50% tariffs are still on the cards unless they really get around to negotiating. But he's going to delay that tariff to the 9th of June. Markets, or the futures markets at least, responded to that quite well yesterday. And we're still in the throes of the markets being open at the moment, but we haven't seen any negative reaction necessarily to that. But it just, this repeated kind of tariff narrative of he says one thing and then you kind of just know, give it 2, 3, 4 days, he's going to flip-flop back into it. But the market always seems to react. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was Tom that posted it in Discord Even the big boys like JP Morgan, they're getting wise to this now as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the tariff narrative sort of works, going forward. What I would say is China and the EU, obviously two of the biggest kind of trading partners, if you want to call them partners, with the United States. So they're probably the two that may affect the market if the outcomes don't go that way. Both of them currently on delays at the moment while they negotiate. So we just need to bear that one in mind as we go forward. But despite all of that, the institutions are still absolutely, I'm trying to change the word I was going to use, gagging is what I was going to say, but keen to just keep on purchasing BTC. And we've seen that over the last week. We go on to sort of far side. You just look at BlackRock on the left-hand side. Since I last went live, which was the 20th of May, they have purchased, let me just do some quick, $2 billion worth. We don't know what they got today. $2 billion worth in 4 days. So effectively 20,000 additional Bitcoin. The rest of them, they are slightly playing ball. One thing that I did notice, just looking at this a bit more today, totally random, but Wisdom Tree, I mean, they've got 37 million involved within it. Can we even really call them an ETF player at this stage? I mean, I'd struggle to suggest that Invesco, Franklin, and Valkyrie were, but they technically still do have one, so they're 37 sitting proud. But you look at, as I say, we always just look at BlackRock and look where they've been and where they've gone. Last week, so where were we last week? Got to try and move this across. 20th, they were 633,000, and they now have 652,000. So there you go, the 19,000 additional Bitcoin that they bought over the last week. So that we were worried by the beginning of April. There was a lot of selling through March and April. We were getting kind of worried as to what was happening. That narrative seems to have flipped quite considerably at the moment. It is a bit of a lagging indicator, if you will, or narrative. But the fact that they're still buying, and remember, they have to buy the underlying asset, shows that there is still interest within that. And for me, the bull market is therefore still on. We'll go into that a little bit later on. Now, one of the things that has been talked about the last couple of days is the Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin 2025 conference, which starts today. It's in Las Vegas this year. But the reason people have been talking about, one, everyone's been getting excited. Obviously, there's, big players in the industry talk about it. There's the theory behind it, with the amount of noise that's made because of this national conference or international conference, annual conference, that the price goes up. Well, last year, that actually wasn't necessarily the case. And we had Donald Trump, at the time, president candidate. He was a presidential candidate. He wasn't president-elect or anything like that. But it didn't have the effect everyone thought, because the conference last year, I've got it on the chart here, I think, was in July, the end of July. He spoke, yes, on the day he spoke, which was a Saturday, it did go up by a couple of %. But unfortunately, that was the weekend preceding the carry trade unwind in Japan, which caused the crash in early August of last year. And you can kind of see it on this chart here. Sorry, everything is a little slow, but we rallied up to 70,000 off the back of the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, only for us to fall to sub 50,000. It's a 12-hour chart in a matter of days as we just cascaded down. Now, that wasn't necessarily a sell the news event, although you could argue the amount was spoken about in the sort of days leading up to this conference, and the fact that Donald Trump was going to talk about it. We just had that assassination attempt on him. Everything was just sort of, very much riding the wave, and Donald Trump was obviously promoting cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin as the future leading up to this. But this was a dump caused by something completely different. But just have a look at how far that drop was. It's a 30% drop in a matter of days. And I don't say this necessarily to suggest that that's what's going to happen next week off the back of this conference, but just with all of the euphoria that was driving into the market this time last year, or roughly last year, we still saw some epic swings to the downside. And we just got to bear that in mind, that macro events outside of the Bitcoin chasm can certainly continue to drive that down. And unfortunately, tariffs, wars, all of that kind of stuff is still percolating around, which could lead to any of those drops on the way down. That being said, the other thing, and I don't think it's as big a pull, but JD Vance is actually speaking at the conference. I don't know if it's today, tomorrow, or the day after. I'm not necessarily too sure. It's the first time a sitting vice president has actually spoken at this conference, which is, a momentous occasion. I'm not sure it's quite that high, or a red letter day. I don't think it necessarily has the impact that people think it's going to do. It's good that we are getting that political coverage from it, but I don't think it's going to be as strong as if the president himself was rocking up to talk about it. For me, I think it's just something that is generating some clicks on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and some news articles. I'm not necessarily expecting a large pump solely off the back of Bitcoin 2025 conference. So they'll have some plenty interesting things to talk about. One of those being, and this came out, I think it was spoken about yesterday. It was discredited, but I think it's actually now come out that Trump media is trying to raise $2.5 billion to invest in Bitcoin, which, that's about 20,000 Bitcoin that they're looking to purchase. So the article goes on to say Trump Media and Technology Group raised about $2.5 billion to invest in Bitcoin. Trump's social media firm said on Tuesdays it looks to diversify its revenue stream. So it's going to raise funds by selling $1.5 billion in stock, and then also raise another $1 billion through convertible notes at a 30% premium. So I don't know when they're going to look to actually start purchasing that, but given we've already got sort of a breakdown of how they're going to raise the funds, you got to think this is fairly advanced in the discussion. And 20,000 Bitcoin is not to be sniffed at. So it'd be interesting to see sort of how they go about buying it, what that's going to do for the price of Bitcoin, and ultimately we always talk about the fact that a rising tide lifts all ships, and so even if Bitcoin does continue to have a strong dominance presence, we expect that to still lift the altcoins, and obviously the one we're most interested in. What's this next one? Oh yeah, and something else that it is crypto related, but it's actually also stock market related, is Circle have announced that they filed the paperwork for an IPO. So they are looking to be listed on the stock exchange. That could happen as early as next week, as I understand it. And I think this is a bit of a big deal. I mean, people always talk about Coinbase, completely crypto related companies listed on the stock exchange. People talk about MicroStrategy as well, but Circle, this is I suppose an opportunity for people to maybe invest in a very legitimate, in inverted commas, and I don't mean to downplay it. Obviously, everyone has their views on this kind of stuff, but a legitimate cryptocurrency based company that is just starting out on the stock exchange. Now, typically IPOs absolutely rocket on day one and then collapse back down in sort of the weeks afterwards. So I'm not saying you should rush in whenever this thing lists next week, if it is indeed next week. But you've got to just think, well, who are Circle and what do they do? So Circle, if you remember, if you understand, they are the issuer of USDC, which is the second largest stablecoin on the market. Not only is that, it is the with all the regulations that are coming in into the United States, Circle is the go-to. USDC is the go-to recognized stablecoin. That's similar, I believe, with the EU, and we've seen a lot of exchanges sort of like delisting the likes of Tether so they can meet regulatory requirements and just using the USDC pair instead. So there is an opportunity here that for those of you that are looking to, whether it be from a pension point of view or just sort of diversifying your exposure in cryptocurrency, looking for other ways of doing it, you may want to consider having a look at Circle. I probably now have to say not financial advice, but we've seen how well Coinbase can do in bull markets. We've also seen how badly Coinbase can do in bear markets, and similarly with MicroStrategy. But here is an opportunity for maybe getting in relatively close to the ground as an opportunity to see how that goes. And Circle isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and neither is USDC. And I just feel that as the regulatory framework for crypto gets ironed out, approved, etc., I think the legitimacy of Circle, the legitimacy of USDC will probably help its cause. Anyway, food for thought for those of you that are interested in that sort of thing. Let me just make sure I'm still talking to everybody. Okay, all right, still looks all good. Let's just close that one down. Right, let's. I've got a couple of other news articles later on, but let's just get into where we sit with sort of Bitcoin, what it's done. As most of you have understand what this chart is, you've seen it enough times. I'm just zooming out a little bit. I'll zoom back in a second, because for those of you that are new and wondering what all these lines are, this is the Fibonacci that I drew, a very long time ago, which basically connected the all-time high back in March 24 down to the it's not that one there, it's here, down to the carry trade collapse in August of 24, and it's just followed through. And I've kept it at that just because it's respected it as well as it has done. We've actually got to a point now, though, because 110,000 was what we would say is 2 on the Fibonacci retracement or extension in this instance. And whilst I'm not going to necessarily redraw it at the moment, all we've really got to go on after that, I could put all the levels on. I'm just so interested in the 618 levels, and you can kind of see 2 618s at 140, we go at 208, and then beyond. And I'm not suggesting we're going to fly past these anytime soon. But I may look to just sort of, I don't want to confuse it by having a Fibonacci on a Fibonacci, Fibception, or anything like that, but I may have to just sort of redraw this going forward. But we'll leave it where it currently sits at the moment. We'll zoom back in now so you can all kind of see what we're dealing with. And so last week's call was this green and red candle here. They were here. This green candle and this red candle here. And after we finished the call, we flew through this liquidation level here. So short liquidation levels from 106 to 108. I've obviously just turned that grey, moved it to the left now. We then flew up to the previous all-time high of 109. We managed to peak our head above it, and then we've obviously had that retracement. Now, on that way and that move up, there wasn't really a sort of an area of liquidations to massive ones. There were stacked from 110 to about 115, but they weren't particularly large, and we didn't bother marking them up for that reason. But what we can see is, whenever we decided we turned around, which was, as I said, was Thursday, we've come back down and immediately sought out, one, some previous support from where we broke through, fine, but two, actually also the base of where these long liquidations were then starting to build up. So from 104,200 to 106,500, and that's where we got down to. And actually, we really sort of, the bulls have been defending those liquidations quite well, because we've got down to that level, but we've always spiked up from that one. And we kind of find ourselves in this position at the moment where we're battling that 2 on the Fibonacci level. We're kind of in between these two heat map liquidations, but they're so closely bunched together. It's really difficult to call just solely based off that which direction they're going to go. And actually, at times like this, you probably think, there'll probably be some whipsaw action to try and take them both out. My personal view would be probably a move up first to really sort of build on that bullish momentum. Maybe even start to sort of build some additional shorts within this sort of pocket here, and then sort of a whipsaw action to take it back down. You've got to remember that we are still sort of 12-hour time frame here, but we are just in sort of some sort of consolidation period. We have had that move up from sort of 103, I think 103 to 112. You've got to class that as a move up. But now, the last 2 or 3 days, we've been consolidating between sort of 107 and 110 quite nicely. And we are just consolidating within that. And so I feel that we can quite easily move to sort of 105 and 112 and still be within that consolidation period, which would give the market makers a perfect opportunity to have a go at both of those liquidity levels. They're both fairly new, but they've already stood out in terms of the size and the heat. So we've got some big degen orders in both of those pockets, which would be quite nice for the market makers to cash in on. I'm not sure what this news article here is. We're going to find out. Long-term holders quietly capitalizing on the drop. I'm not sure what. Oh yeah, well, it's just talking exactly here about over the last week we've had similar kind of things with major liquidation events occurring in which prices sort of gone up and gone back down just to take out over leveraged traders, which is exactly what we talk about with market maker theory, and that's sort of where we see it. And so yeah, I've obviously already talked about that. I'm going to just close a few of these down as we go in, just because, you know what, this isn't the most powerful of laptops, so let's just try and cool it down as best we can as we go. Don't think I'm going to need to refer back to some of these news articles. If we're running, in terms of very big picture Bitcoin, weekly kind of time frame, everything's still looking very nice. We've had that breakout, as we've talked about, from this level. We did this previously. I don't know why I didn't save this fork. We're kind of just sort of trying to see where this is going. I mean, on the logarithmic level, this goes all the way up to 150. But if you were to be a bit more realistic and maybe do it on the linear, I have to resize this. Just give me a second. Probably looking at about 130. The only thing for me on this, I'm going to go back to linear, it was just for that. The only thing for me on this is we have now had effectively 2 months of green candles in a row once this one closes. And since that bottom, early August, which again, it was all linked back to the tariff announcements and everything else, but it has tied in quite nicely with a retest of the 50 EMA on the weekly time frame. It's just been a very strong move up, and so I do expect a pullback. I don't necessarily have to suggest it's going to go all the way back to the 20 EMA, which is the blue line on this chart here, because we're on the weekly time frame. But I do expect some period of profit taking, some opportunity for just some further consolidation. And yeah, we just got to be prepared for that. It's not going to be the end of the world. We just got to expect it to happen. And once we know that it's going to happen, or believe it's going to happen, then, we can just get in control of our emotions going through from it. We'll have a look at Bitcoin on some sort of lower time frames a little bit later on. But, just for me, still looking sort of very healthy in terms of moves up. And as I say, whether or not we're in those wave counts, we'll have to wait and see. But, nice consolidation period, strong move up. Nice consolidation, strong move up. Nice consolidation period. We have made a new all-time high. This is to be expected then that we're on that next move up. Whether or not it's the final move up, we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of wave counts, we are getting pretty close to the peak within that. And something that was brought to my attention today by one of the members in Discord, Tim. So thanks for that. I'd never seen this before, so it's something that I'm certainly going to be looking into in more detail. But it's the CBBI, which is Crypto Bitcoin Bull Run Index. And for those of you that have watched the February cuddle talk that I did on market top indicators, where I went over like 20 to 30 indicators, this is a very similar thing. It's it's analyzing metrics that we're familiar with. It's combining all of those together to effectively give it a score, and then that score is reflective of whether or not we're at the market peak. And it just better aligned with blow off tops, and we'll have a look at this in a bit more detail. But it's interesting sort of where their information is coming from and what it's necessarily saying at the moment. So obviously, spoiler alert, the index that they are referring to is at the moment saying that actually we're getting quite high within the index. We're at 79. The criteria, anything under 25, we're kind of bear market. It doesn't obviously predict market bottoms, but it's suggesting anything under 25, we're close to a market bottom. 25 to 75, we're just, in that transition phase. And then 75 plus, we are, close to a market top. Now, when you scroll down, we can have a look at some of the indicators that it takes information from. And as I say, a lot of them will be familiar with yourselves especially if you watch that cuddle presentation I gave, because I think I went through all of these. The pi cycle top indicator in there, new pull chart is in there, the Rodel ratio, the Puell multiple, the 2-year moving average, the MVRV, the reserve risk, which I didn't think I went into, and then the Wu Bull, which is the total cap versus the coin value destroyed days. And then, the Bitcoin Trollololo, which I think is actually Google Trends, but anyway, that's in there as well. What they've done is they've combined all of that together, and it comes in on this chart here, which I don't think I can sort of blow up too well, but let me just get rid of that. What you can see on the chart, the rainbow-looking chart, which some people may think is the stock to flow. This is the Bitcoin price. So it goes all the way back to sort of 2011. So it's the Bitcoin price, but what is superimposed on it is the heat map of whether or not this CBBI is hot or cold. So the redder it gets, obviously, is the closer you get to the market blow off top. And if we just have a look, I'm trying to use it. Go back to 2014. Obviously, it's red. It gets all the way up to 97 on the indicator. So the indicator is also this blue lines here. And you can have a fiddle around with it and delete some of these. And then it will just recalculate it. But we can see the peak of price in 2013 was also indicated in on here. In 2017, the peak and the peak were almost on top of each other. 2021, and this was live in 2021. I don't know when it started. It would have been between 2018 and 2021, but it was live prior to this. But you can see it believes that the market top, much like I do, was actually the first peak in price. And actually the second one was just sort of consumer sentiment taken a bit too far. So the past 3 cycles, it has seemed to have spotted the top quite well. Where are we at the moment? Well, as we alluded to, we're actually at 78, 79. So we're not in that dark red, which all of the previous ones have been at. So it doesn't look like we're at that blow off top at the moment. But there is a chance there. So look, I came across this today. I've looked into it today. But given that I sort of like have that, I think I should have brought it up, shouldn't I? I have that, just if I can find it, which I can't. Where is it? I don't know where it is. The indicator for a signal checklist. Where I have this signal checklist of, are we close to, should we be selling of anything? And you can go through all of these and have a look. This is just a visualization of where the market currently sits without having to scroll through 20 of them. I want to have a bit more of a play around or look through some of the data and just make sure that it's actually telling us the right story. But, Tim, thanks for the heads up on that. And certainly we'll be looking into it going forward. Just checking everyone's still there still. Hopefully so. If someone can just say you're still there, that'd be perfect. And I'll continue. So where are we, where are we potentially going? I'll put a Bitcoin chart up whilst I'm talking at the moment. Where, that whole conversation about where next, what next, now that we've done an all-time high. And we'll cover price action and TA over the short term in a moment. We're having a look at the medium term and where we're going. And, I wouldn't say I've necessarily been at loggerheads, but I appreciate there's maybe been some conflicting discussions between myself and Simon in terms of, money flows into the crypto space, into even the traditional markets, and how that's going to get us to Valhalla and some of the heights that we're hoping that we're necessarily going to get to. And I stand by my views that, I think getting, 7 to 9 trillion over the next 6 months will necessarily be difficult. But, just to try and I suppose, at least give some level of optimism to people, there is still a very bullish case that's building on the sidelines off the back of just a couple of events which are sort of almost stealthily happening. And I'm not necessarily talking about QE, or I'm not talking about rate cuts. We talk about those enough. And we've got a rate cut in June. We'll wait to see what happens there. But spoiler alert, 97% of the probability at the moment that it is going to remain the same. I'm more talking about sort of funds that are sat on the sidelines waiting to go. And it's something that we've talked about in the past, but I think it's worth just mentioning again, because I was watching a YouTube video today and they started talking about it, and it made me think that actually it's probably worthwhile discussing, and that is the money market fund. I don't have two screens here, so just let me get another screen up so I don't mess all of this up whilst I'm talking about it. But money market fund, imagine it as a safe haven for institutions that are investing large amount of money in risk-on assets. And when times are uncertain, what they can do is they can move their funds into sort of like a low risk fund, which basically is it's safe, it's boring, but it is high liquidity and high quality institutional investment vehicles, such as treasury bonds, etc., in which institutions can just park their money over the short term, ride out any uncertainty within the market, and then they can move it back in. And at the moment, the market, the money market fund currently stands at $7.2 trillion. Now, I mean, one, that's an awful lot of money. I am not suggesting that, this time next week or this time in a year, 7.2 trillion is going to be absolutely taken out of the money market fund and placed straight into risk-on assets. That's not necessarily how it works. But what we do know is there is an awful lot of money currently at the moment on the sidelines that's waiting to be invested. And the key thing that really sort of like drove this home is 12 months ago, this was at 6 trillion. So we've actually had a 20% increase over the last 12 months. And that is a number that I think, it can have a realistic impact on risk-on assets. And notice that I'm saying risk-on assets and not necessarily crypto here. But you think about what's happened over the last 12 months that has made institutional investors go, you know what, we just want to park our money somewhere else, but we'll be happy to put it back. And we have had some global M2 increase over that period. So yes, obviously more money is available to do that. But I would argue that the vast majority of that 20%, that 1.2 trillion, has come from a risk-on asset of some sort. And 12 months ago, we were, in the United States at least, there was talk of potentially a recession. We had Joe Biden. We had the presidential election was in full swing. I can't remember if Biden had stepped down by that stage. I don't think he necessarily had. But there is just a huge amount of uncertainty when it comes to presidential elections, US presidential elections, just given the superpower that they are. So people may just want to sit that one out. Then we get Trump that comes in, but we get with Trump the tariffs and his sort of bullheadedness. I will make America great again. I'm going to start with the economy and I'm going to make us strong. And, like it or not, his approach to dealing with the tariffs has been very unsettling for the markets. And so that's moved away. But ultimately, when that calms down, we are going to, I believe the vast majority of that additional 20%, maybe it's going to be more, maybe it'll dip below, but that additional 20% is going to find itself moving back into traditional markets. And we can interrogate this chart if we want. We can have a look at the grey columns moving vertically and see that they are major recessions, and we can see that there are dips coming out of those as people go back into risk on assets. We haven't really had that recession yet confirmed to us, so we can't rely solely on that. But we can now see that actually there's potentially a large pot of money that is going to move back into risk on assets. Now, as I mentioned, that's not necessarily all going to flood back into the crypto space. It's very unlikely. But there is the money multiplier, which I know Sam talked about on Thursday, to take into consideration. But the other thing you got to take into consideration, this is institutional money. And the best institutional vehicle at the moment are ETFs. And the ETF, the best ETF, performing ETF at the moment is the Bitcoin ETF. And so when institutions do want to go back in and they are feeling risk on, a lot of them are going to look at that Bitcoin ETF, in my mind, and suggest that actually that's the thing that's performed well, better than anything else over the last 18 months. That's what I want to get involved within. And that's where we're going to see it. And again, going back to that rising tide lifting all ships, they have to buy the underlying asset for that ETF. Other ETFs you don't have to, but with Bitcoin you do. They're going to buy it. They're going to hold it. They're not going to move it as quickly as retail may. That's just going to be able to increase the market cap of Bitcoin, the overall market cap, and then you got that money multiplier just outspilling into altcoins and lifting us up. So there's absolutely that as part of what I can see going forward. The other thing that we talked about 4 weeks ago is earnings reports. Now, it's the big boys' earning report tomorrow once this page loads, and that's NVIDIA. So, they're one of the last to report, but tomorrow at the close of the market, we are going to get NVIDIA's earnings for Q1 2025. And we know for the last 2 years, they've pretty much carried the stock markets on their back. And so a positive outcome or earnings report tomorrow, I think will just help provide that confidence that maybe we do have the ability for those risk-on assets. And I don't think it's that far-fetched to suggest that we won't, so that we will have a positive outcome. I mean, AI computer chips still massively in demand. I appreciate the tariffs and the deals, trade deals with China may hinder that. But, yesterday or the day before yesterday, we've had Saudi Arabia coming out of the woodwork with a $600 billion AI opportunity for 18,000 NVIDIA chips. They're wanting to make them the go-to place for AI. We saw on Donald Trump's tour of the Middle East with the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, also with AI opportunities there. And when we're talking about AI, we are talking about processing power, and the leading person company to delivering that at the moment is NVIDIA. So there's plenty of genuine deals that are being finalized, but also rumors in terms of potential in the near future that I think that NVIDIA still is a strong play. There's a reason it's been able to carry the stock exchange for as long as it has. And I don't necessarily see that unwinding. I'm trying to see if I opened up. Let me just have a look here. That's nice. That's BitTensor. Bear with me. Sorry, it is going slow. There we go. So we've got earnings tomorrow. As I say, it's after the close of the market. So, tomorrow might be a bit of an interesting day in the market in terms of we may, rally hard into the close because people are very confident on it, or actually we're just going to sit on our hands and wait for the information to come through. In terms of the earnings report, I mean, look, I don't really care what the estimates are. I'd rather just sit on my hands and wait till we actually get what is reported. But, we've got estimated EPS of 0.73, but the revenue estimate is 43.34 billion. So some pretty big numbers, even estimated. We get at that or above those, and then it's happy days. Below those, we may see the market react in a not so favourable fashion. But it'll all sort of whittle down to what those earnings are. Probably about 9:30 UK time tomorrow evening, and we'll find out about those. But definitely, a positive outcome there to just sort of provide that confidence. You go and have a look at things like the money market as well in terms of what is sloshing out on the sidelines. And there's no guarantee of when that's going to come in, but I'm just saying there is a pool of money waiting to be reinvested somewhere. And ultimately, you could argue that the longer it takes for that to do, the more legitimacy the likes of cryptocurrency is going to have, with regulations actually being ironed out and approved and coming into law. Then maybe it might even be easier for them. We don't necessarily want that because that could take years to resolve, but that's where it currently sits. Crypto markets, really looking here. Fear and greed's at 68 at the moment. I don't think that's necessarily too bad given we were all-time high last week, only at 68. I'll probably take that. Altcoin season, the moment 26. It's still pretty much Bitcoin territory. There's no major shift towards that. I did actually have a look at sort of like last 7 days, and Bitcoin's quite far down on this list. I think it's like 30 odd lower. Bitcoin's at 51, so I'm surprised at the moment it's actually saying it's 26. Be interesting to see how that changes over the next couple of days, but that's currently where it's sitting. In terms of any questions that people ask me, I think there was only one at the start of this call. Once it loads, It's from Migs. I hope you're good, Migs. After the cuddle, are you still in root or have you gone into some alpha? So this is just referring back to BitTensor. I'm still 100% in root. I don't have the time, especially on holiday, for the alpha trading. I've still not got my head around it all, with just sort of how alpha tokens are working versus the subnets, etc. So no, I'm not rushing into it. I thought the guys that came and spoke, they spoke very well in terms of it. But if anything, for me, it made me think I'd rather just do a long-term play. But, I try and keep up with what people are talking about in the subnets thread. I haven't really felt like there's a massive need for me to rush in. It's not like everyone is just sort of like, really saying how well they're doing. I think a lot of people are doing okay in it, but it seems to be a lot of work. And so for that reason, I'm just quite happy sitting in root with my 15% a month or whatever it is, and just ticking. That also gives me the opportunity to continue to try and take advantage of, sidestepping or trading opportunities, which, again, in Discord, we've seen some really good success stories, a couple of people talking about those. It just goes to show you what you can do, even with really small moves, and just consistency over that. Whereas if I was in alphas, from what I understand, there's some pretty shallow liquidity pools, and so trying to get out to try and take advantage of those, it just isn't necessarily there. So, yeah, I'm just happy to just sit in root for me for the moment. People may find that boring, but it works with what I'm doing. Okay, all still looking like we're going well, so I'll leave that and we'll go back. We'll actually have a look at some charting now. You have to forgive me on my small screen and also trying to use a trackpad, but we'll go there. So here's where Bitcoin sits on the daily. Let's get rid of that. We don't need it for now. We can free up a bit more space. And you can kind of see we've had, so it's on the daily, we've had this sort of W formation, which I think we've talked about before. The question was really like, where's that rise one? And for me, this is the rise, this whole move there. We've gone through the 50 vector candle. That's the right hand side of the W, looking quite nicely. We've managed to consolidate in that period there. The question for me now is, this is still, in my mind, a second rise. And has the second rise finished and we're in a consolidation period, or are we going to see a relatively quick turnaround and this second rise continued? We're not necessarily going to know that. Certainly, daily candles here, probably we could wait another week or so before we found that one out. I think if we do continue to move sideways, we're going to have to class it as as just a rise two, and then that's a consolidation. And we'll be looking for that rise three, and then the rise three, daily as well, because to form from a W to an M on a daily can take months to do. We may be wondering whether or not that's going to be taking us towards the end of this cycle. But at the moment, still looking fairly good there. Let's just get rid of these. I'll tell you what. Remove joins. But again, even on the daily, this is why I keep these EMAs on there. This 10 EMA, just keeping things nice and orderly on the daily at the moment. Always closing above it. Yeah, we're spiking back down to retest it. But effectively, for the last month, we've only been below it once. So really showing some good support there. And until that necessarily breaks, I don't think we've got anything necessarily to worry about. And even the time when it did break, the 20 EMA went and caught us anyway. So that's why I have these on the charts. Nothing necessarily to worry about. There is, there's always a time when we're going to have to retest the 50. That 50 sitting around about 100k at the moment, deep within the only vector zone that is left, or close to us, does sort of make me think, actually, is there a move to be had down to there? And if there is, don't worry about it. It happens. It happens on moves up. That's kind of to be expected. But that would certainly confirm that we've completed our rise 2 as well, I should add. But maybe then we do see some sort of move back down to 102 by the time this 50 moves up and sort of time moves through, which again I bloody closed them, didn't I? But it kind of ties back in with these levels on the 3-day time frame, that 102 down on the south there, and then we look to have that move back up. Be prepared for it. Don't worry about it. Remind yourself it's still Bitcoin over 100k. Last time we broke 100k, we then went on a 3-month stretch without getting back above it. So that's, for me, is a bit of a What have I done there? No idea. Okay, let's close that. Right, we go down onto some lower time frames of the 4 hour. And again, obviously there's not going to be anything to the north because we're at relatively all-time high time frames. But you can kind of see, even on the 4 hour, as we go down, 50 EMA is what's been catching us. And it's been working very nicely in terms of just keeping us going, keeping us on track. That 200 EMA is going to sort of correlate roughly with the 50 EMA on the daily. And we've got some other vector zones here. And I really, if we can't keep the 50 EMA, I would not be surprised that we took this blue vector candle out. Let's call it 105.5, and maybe even getting down and taking out some of these vectors, and maybe at sort of 104, which again ties in with both liquidity levels that we've talked about previously. The 6.5 to the 402, that would take that one out. We talked about that whipsaw action. So we could see that actually playing out, taking out the liquidity, but then having genuine place for us to sort of turn around off EMAs and the closing of vector zones. So I can see that it's hard to predict where it'll go above because we've just not seen price necessarily get above there. You can't predict, it will go 5% and turn back around, but anything climbing above 112 is just an enjoyable journey just to watch as it goes through. Maybe we'll be able to sort of start to pick up on at least some heat maps liquidity and maybe give us an idea of where it's closing out. And just as a reminder, that currently sits at the moment at about 113.6. So not much above where we currently are. We're only talking about here really. In terms of our favourite, BitTensor again, we're on the 4 hour. We'll start with the 4 hour since we're on it, and on the daily just because we need to build that picture. The daily doesn't really show the W as effective. I think it's more just of a V-shaped reversal, maybe the inverted head and shoulders. The principle's still the same. We've had that strong move up, consolidation, another move up. Not as hard, but still from sort of 350 to 450, so not too bad. That period of consolidation now. And as I said, when we're looking at it from the 3-day time frame, all eyes to me just seem to be saying that actually this is just gearing up for the next move up. We're getting ourselves in the position where we're getting the EMAs lined up in the right configuration, and certainly over the last week, the 10 and the 20 have just been very good support. And I obviously marked these off last week. I know I talked about 580 being this sort of level here, but if we did get past it and looking at vectors on the daily, 645 and then a retest of the all-time high at sort of 713 daily close, remember, all-time high, would be logical targets. And in terms of the strength that we've seen in previous moves up, there's no reason to suggest that we can't do that in one next move up. Hey, strong NVIDIA turn results tomorrow, AI-based cryptos, I'm sure will do well from that one. So there's something to look for from there. In terms of anything to the downside, the 50 and the 200 EMA and the daily are basically on top of each other at 370, 380, shall we say. So I think that's something that we've got to look at. In terms of like previous price action from a horizontal point of view, that 380 kind of lines up quite nicely with this chunk here, this wick down, previous price action there, and then some chop that we had, support and resistance through February and March. So I think there's a lot that lines up to that sort of 380 level on the daily time frame. Let's get rid of that so we can go down the 4 hour. I don't think many people are really trading Tau at the moment. Obviously, I know a lot of you are in subnets and root and alphas and all of that, and apologies that I don't really go through with it, but I'm not sure how good the TA is anyway, nor the charting. But from the 4 hour point of view, there is that W formation there, which we talked about, and the rise count now looks a little bit different because we probably count this as rise 1, that as rise 2, and then this would be rise 3. And the question really, what we don't want to see is that this then becomes some sort of, that's not working. Let's try that one again, shall we? We don't want to see this to become some sort of M formation topping pattern, and it moves back down. I think, we'll only really know. Well, actually, let's just say we'll only really know if we lose that level at 390 on the 4 hour. Maybe we wick down, but if we lose and close below sort of 370, this vector candles here and this 800 EMA, we may then actually have to accept that we may be on a topping pattern from the 4 hour. But at the moment, you know, we're not there. We're actually kind of relying on the patterns to reset with some outside influence moving that one through. But it's something definitely to watch and to note. But you know, for those of you that managed to ride this down, get in somewhere between 160 and even 300, you've still got plenty of wiggle room if you just sitting on your hands, taking in some Tau root staking rewards. You would have been benefited from a couple of months worth of those, so hopefully some decent returns on that to sort of ride that down. In terms of me doing any sort of side sets, there's nothing really right now that's suggesting that it's an optimal play. So I'm not taking any risks on that at the moment. If things change, then absolutely I'll have a look at it. But as it sits, not necessarily. In terms of some of the other big boys, I think we have to have that conversation. Oh, do you know what? Going back to Tau, just because I put a fib on there, let's just see where we are in terms of fibs with this. Let's get rid of all of that. Where are we going to take it from? That's the question. We have to take it from all-time high to this peak bottom here. Okay. So just to add some sort of confluence to it in terms of the 618, we've broken through it. We've just been sort of riding on top of the 618. So staying above that again, it's just helping us on that build back up, and then 540, which is probably the lower end of the areas I was talking about. I think I was saying sort of more like 580, wasn't I? The 6, 7, or 8. So, okay, I'm kind of giving us a block range there, but potentially that there. Right, let's have a look at Ethereum. Give it some credit where, well, it's not due because it's underperformed so badly, but we have, we've had that move up beginning of the month, and it's been able to hold itself. We're battling with the 618 at the moment, and each time we've hit it, we have rejected. And we've come back down. There is actually a potential trade opportunity there for that. It's a $300 move. So it's like a 15% move ultimately. So 12%, I suppose. So not a too bad a play to make, but I would absolutely wait to see how this plays out. What I would say is there's plenty of vector candles on the 4 hour in which it can fall back to, and it has rejected off there very cleanly previously. So I think there's definitely an opportunity just to wait how that one forms out. But again, just moving sideways, consolidating within that pattern. We've had some sort of bottoming pattern here. It's not really a W formation. Break up, consolidation, break up, consolidation. So this looks like it is rise 2. We're just waiting for it to move. I can't move into, why won't it let me? There we go. Move into sort of rise 3. But the one thing just to remember about Ethereum, as good as it's been, it's still not retaken its all-time high this cycle. So I still class it as underperforming, regardless of any move that it's necessarily had. It hasn't performed well this cycle. I don't know many people that in the group that are necessarily in it or do look to trade it, but sorry, sniffed there. That's where it sits. Let's see, what else is there of any interest to kind of look through? I was going to have a look at NVIDIA just in terms of where it was currently sitting. Is that a bit messy? Potentially. Did I have it on a clean chart? Sorry, just bear with me a second. I think I did, NVIDIA. This is on the weekly at the moment. But again, it's... let's put it on the daily. What was that? There's something I wanted to talk about with NVIDIA. I can't think what it was now. Price action-wise. Anyway, I can't remember, so it doesn't matter. I won't drag it out any further than it needs to be. We talked about dominance. We've talked about Ethereum. I'm not going to necessarily go through some of these alts because I know most of you are just 100% in Tau or a derivative form of Tau, so there's no point going through. Casper, I think a few people have, so let's have a look at Casper. And let's get it on this chart. Okay. So, interestingly, Casper 4 hour still following what Ethereum was doing in terms of that battle with the 618. But interestingly enough, this has actually fallen down to the 0.5, which is also, I know it's hard to see, tying in with the 200 EMA there as well, which had a nice move from it. Potential double bottom from that there. And I think there's a potential another trade to be had. Maybe you want to wait for confirmation of it getting through the 50 EMA. Absolutely fine. But, if it did, then you could have a look at an upwards target of around about 12 cents. It seems to move to that quite nicely. I mean, previous times it has actually broken through as well. But that actually looks like a fairly good setup. There is an argument to be made at the moment that the 20 is holding it down, which is again why you probably want to wait to see if we can get a close above the 50 EMA. It's not that far away, so a bit of patience is always good in that side of things before we then can evaluate whether or not that move up is. But I think it's kind of looking good in terms of very similar to a lot of the other ones. We've had that move up from the bottom that we've seen. And we're just in another period of consolidation. And I think a lot of altcoins, they're ready to pop. And I suppose that's where we sit with this quandary with dominance, isn't it? That, whilst I do believe that we're going to move back up here, actually a lot of altcoins are ready to run. And what we know is when altcoins run, they actually do run harder. They do run harder than Bitcoin. So maybe I need to reevaluate it. Maybe there is some sort of move down there, another retest. Bitcoin dominance at the 800 EMA, move that out of the way, and then it moves back up. We get another little mini altcoin season, alt season. Sorry. At the moment, I'm still in that Tau BTC trade, so I've swapped it over to swapped over my BTC into Tau. I've been riding break even. I actually think I'm ever so slightly ahead today now, but I've pretty much been riding break even ever since making the trade. So it's not been neither here nor there. But I think I'm quite happy to just hold on to it and just ultimately see where those go. Right, it's 9:10. I know I started late, but we've probably been going for about an hour. Let's just see if anyone's put anything in chat. Any questions? Would you consider a derivative trade on Tau at the moment? To be honest, I don't think I necessarily would. Just going back into Tau, let's have a look. Let's go into some lower Tau. So when I do that, I don't like to hold trades open for too long, mainly because I just can't sleep at night with them open. So I run down the lower time frames. If I was looking on the lower time frames, so let's start with the hourly. I just don't see, where we go with it at the moment. We're kind of at this middle. We're just in this ranging pattern. I would rather be patient and just kind of wait to see if we're starting to form another pattern. I mean, you could argue, I suppose, because on the hourly, that we've had some sort of W here. We've had that green vector candle coming through the 50 EMA. We've come up here. We're kind of in that consolidation. But again, I'd wait for some sort of confirmation to get out of this zone. And, because it has pulled back to 50 EMA, great. But I'd want it to break through. I'd also want it to break through with volume. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'd have to wait for it to clear this as well, because otherwise I'd just assume that it's actually just heading up and it could easily just turn around that level. So no, not at the moment. Certainly not in a trade that I would like to have and to hold for the shorter periods that I necessarily do. I mean, there are times I go all the way down to the 5-minute time frame. But again, look, over the last, 50 candles or so, we've really just moved sideways. You could argue we've just started to move out of this, but I want to see a vector. In terms of how I do it, I want to see a vector candle that it's moving with volume to try and take some of those out. So I'd be personally holding off it myself. I'd not really been doing derivative trades to the downside. I have taken short opportunities. I did that quite a lot in the first quarter of this year. But again, as I mentioned earlier, there's nothing right now that's really making me think I want to do that. I know some people just do it, wait for it to move $10, buy back in. And if you've got enough Tau, that can be a really useful exercise in terms of bucklift. But I'm not myself. Right, let's have a look. There's nothing else really being mentioned. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock it on the head there. Apologies for the late start again, as I said. And hopefully the quality is good enough for you to get some information from it. I am still around. I'm obviously on holiday, so I'm not answering every single comment. But let's just see some. No, hey, don't worry. Honestly, I actually really enjoy giving these talks. So the fact that I'm away doesn't necessarily change it for me. Bitcoin doesn't sleep, and I may take my foot off a little bit, but I'm much like you guys. I'm always interested to see what it's doing on a daily basis. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. As far as I'm aware, everything's still lined up for Thursday, 1 o'clock with Siam. I'll be around for the week. I'll try and jump on that call if I can as well. But no, enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. And I'll speak to you all soon. Cheers now.